Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Snyder of Snyder Law, and I'm an estate planning, elder law planning attorney in Irvine, and I help families, seniors, and veterans plan to protect what matters most to them, their families and loved ones, their dignity, and their legacy. And today I would like to talk to you about whether or not your parents have an estate plan, but more importantly, whether or not your parents have the right estate plan. Many of us who are in the sandwich generation, we have aging parents and we're caring for our own families, are worried about whether or not our parents are well planned for the end stages of their life and whether or not they even have an estate plan. So that's number one question. For some of us, we know that our parents have an estate plan, but we don't know where it is. And also, we don't know if it's the right plan for them, because they might have engaged in some estate planning years ago. We've heard kind of wind about it. They've talked kind of about that over the time. Oh, we have some things set up. But is it current with what their needs are? Is it current with the laws? Is it the right plan for them? And that's what I want to talk about right now, because now is a key and important time for you to be having those conversations, as we've talked about before, even though they're not easy and you kind of want to run for the hills when you hear about talking to your parents about estate planning, about their health directives, about their finances, as we've talked about in previous weeks. But it's an important one because while they can still plan, if they're able, then we can make these adjustments. Now, there's an old saying that goes, the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So getting in front of that now is going to be important before there's a life event and your parents have a medical crisis and they no longer have mental capacity to help you because they're in the hospital or they've had an onset of dementia and they can't make any of these changes, and it becomes more difficult and sometimes impossible to get in front of some of these problems, like not having a plan or not having the right one and having an outdated plan. So I want to give you some key topics and takeaways when you're thinking about whether or not your parents have the right estate plan for them. The first takeaway is get the team together first so you know where your point A is. As we talk with our clients, before we can go ahead and embark on making any changes or even doing any initial planning to get to where we want to be, we have to understand where we are. So get the team together, your parents' team, so you can better understand where they are today. And that team, of course, includes their attorney, their estate planning attorney, hopefully one that focuses on elder law, but it's a broader array than just the attorney. But we can start there. And oftentimes, that attorney isn't known to the family because it's somebody that the parents used years before. That person might not be practicing anymore. They might have died. That is often the case when we're working with our clients' parents. Or there's just not the relationship there anymore because that attorney didn't keep in touch and certainly isn't one that has had a relationship with the family. But the broader base of the team also can include your parents' financial advisor, their accountant, their insurance agent, any care providers they have. All these are important because estate planning isn't just static to legal documents. It involves a lot of different moving parts of things that are in all of our wagons. I talk a lot about wagon with clients, and we all pulling this wagon around during life with our things in it, and we have different professionals that deal with the different things in our wagon. So getting your team of professionals understanding who they are, and for aging parents, their doctors are going to be super important because what if something happens to your parent medically, and you're going to need to get some information or at least clue them into the fact that mom and dad are in the hospital because they fell or they had a stroke, and cluing their primary physician in and knowing who that is going to be very, very important. So getting that team together. Another key takeaway is making sure you understand where information is stored. So we talk a lot about having information in your estate plan safe, but we want to make it accessible. And this is true with your parents' planning, and all their important legal and financial documents. Do you know where they are? If you had to all of a sudden take over your parents' bill pay because they had a stroke and they can't do this anymore, or you've seen the dementia setting in just either whether it's normal old age or there's been a specific diagnosis, then they might need some assistance. Do you know if they have a mortgage, how to pay it? Do you know what bills they have coming in, or where their bank accounts are, what bank accounts they have, or do they have any online bank accounts? If a lot of people do all their banking online now. Doesn't matter the age. Do you have access to that? Do you know how to get access to that? If something happened to your parents, do you know where their healthcare directives are, their power of attorney documents, their estate planning documents? If they passed away, do you know if they have a will or a trust, where do they keep that? Do they have a safe deposit box? Do you know who has access to that? If there is a safe deposit box or a safe in general, who has the key and what's the plan? When I was younger, my parents didn't leave us in very frequently, but when they did go on a trip or something, they would say, hey, all of our important information is in our safe. It didn't dawn on me until later that I didn't know where the safe actually was, or I certainly didn't have access to get inside of it, so it wouldn't have done any good. You don't want that situation to happen, and we have had those occasions come up where adult children are wondering, I think mom and dad have a safe deposit box, we don't know where it is, or the bank's giving us problems because we don't have the key to access it. So you want to understand where all that is. And stress to your parents, look, you don't need to know specific details about things like all the financial information. You don't need to know specific details about what's in their estate plan if your parents aren't ready to share, or maybe you're not involved in that plan somehow. The key is to just know how it's going to be accessed, making sure that you know how to access it, and if they're not comfortable with you doing it, that they at least have a plan for somebody to access it when it's going to be needed. Third key takeaway is making sure that you're encouraging your parents to get organized when it comes to important financial and insurance documents. So insurance policies are big here because oftentimes we found that seniors have collected policies over the years from different employers, and they've been able to take those policies sometimes with them, and they have a bunch of little policies hanging around that they've been paying on, and not everyone knows about them, and they've forgotten where the paperwork work is, and those get overlooked when it comes to after they've passed away. Or some people have acquired long-term care policies but don't have the original policy. It's an old policy, and there's just a lack of information that's there. And that same goes for financial information. We've had several occasions, unfortunately, with clients whose parents have passed away, only to find out later that they had oil mineral rights in another state, or they had bank accounts in Canada, actual hard stock with a company elsewhere. And to be dealing with this after the fact is much, much more difficult and burdensome than if we had taken a look at all of it on the front end. And lastly, with bank accounts, just like us all, we all have a lot of different bank accounts. We seem to acquire them. There's a lot of different interest rate deals on there, particularly online. And sitting down and maybe going through a consolidation, particularly with your parents. Do they actually need all those bank accounts, or can we consolidate them so it'll just be easier for them to manage and for others to manage later? The last takeaway is making sure that your parents' estate plan is updated. Why? Because there's certainly change in life. There's change in the laws, change in their health, change in their finances, and change in relationships. And all this change is going to affect the type of plan that they have. But when it comes to the law particularly, there's two main points that I want to give you. Number one, oftentimes we've seen that people who've planned, parents particularly, did their planning prior to 2011. And so that's about a decade ago or longer is when they first set up any estate planning. Maybe when they first got married or started having kids, bought their first home, and they haven't really looked at it since. We've had occasions where plans were 20, even 30 years old. And the type of strategies that were used are now outdated, particularly when it comes to estate tax. The estate taxes back then were much different than they are now, particularly in the realm of strategies that were used. You might have heard of something called A/B trust planning. This A/B trust planning was a very popular type of an estate planning strategy, not even that long ago, but prior to 2011, because the estate tax system was different. Now, federal estate tax, in California we don't currently have an estate tax, it's almost inapplicable to most people because you need to have an estate as an individual that is over $11.4 million before the federal estate tax kicks in. And a married couple can share these exemption levels. So a married couple has to have an estate that is $22.8 million or higher before the federal government, Uncle Sam, comes knocking and taxes the estate upon the death of the second spouse. That assumes that they didn't make any gifts during their life or and utilized any of that lifetime gift exemption. But the point is that affects less than 0.2% of the population in the United States. So a lot of people are carrying around outdated trust plans with a strategy that no longer is applicable. And as a result, that impacts other aspects of their planning in their life as those plans mature, as we say, when people start passing away, a spouse passes away. Now the AB trust kicks in, and the result might be unintended. Because the problem it was trying to avoid isn't there, and that just, unfortunately, the result, it creates other problems. Number one, it creates an income tax problem when it comes to capital gains on appreciating property, like a home. There are restrictions on this B trust, and certain plans are set up that the spouse has restricted access to funds that are in there, and that was due because of the strategy that was used before that's now outdated. So bottom line, if your parents planned prior to 2011, they likely have an AB trust plans set, and they should review it to make sure that the provisions in there are still applicable to their situation. And secondly, the power of attorney documents. These same plans also created a power of attorney, a durable power of attorney back then too, and so the signature dates on those documents are really old. They'll technically, by the signature date, legally they're not invalidated, but we've found situations where financial institutions and banks have given people problems when it comes to recognizing a power of attorney that has a dated signature, a signature that's dated 18 months, more than 18 months ago, and they're not accepting them. That's not legal necessarily for them to do that, but the challenge is that you have to go ahead and fight the bank or the financial institution, and it creates a big headache. In addition, a lot of the terminology in those power of attorney documents that were used so long ago are just outdated as well, and they're not as inclusive as the ones that should be used now. For example, digital assets, online accounts, all those old power of attorneys don't have the right language in them to account for these type of assets that we have, so it creates problems. Also, types of planning. If you need to step in and help your parent plan because they became incapacitated due to dementia or a health event like a stroke, some of these older power of attorneys aren't equipped to deal with those situations, and there's limited things that you can do that you might not be so limited if your parents had updated their planning. So those are just some key thoughts. There's a lot here to digest, of course. If you have questions, let me know. You can put them in the feed. Happy to answer them. You can, of course, go to www.asksnyderlaw.com. Schedule some time with me so you can ask a question. Happy to answer you offline. And if there are things that you want to know about, please let me know too. Happy to talk about them here. So hopefully that was informative and helpful for you in helping your parents and making sure that their estate plan is the right plan for them. Again, my name is Kevin Snyder. I'm an estate planning and elder law planning attorney here in Irvine, and I hope you have an amazing week. Take care, everyone.